All right. Hello, Lisa, and whoever else might end up watching this, because it's going to be on my YouTube channel. uh, I'll just state for the video, my name is Matthew Zolkowski, and I'm presenting on a conference, sort of, on a discussion on the painting John A. Harvie, the Barque John A. Harvie, which is currently stored at the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic in their painting archive. I don't. Last time I was there, it was not on display, and that was earlier this month, November 2020. So it could be on display by the time you see this. It could not be. I'm not sure. They don't exactly have many people going in during the pandemic. But anyways, ain't the point. I just want to make sure that my Panopto reading's going. Okay, let's go. All right. So unlike Catherine, I may not be quite as concise because I have to make sure that that I'm staying on time, and we gotta check a lot of things. So basically, I'm gonna just talk about this painting with you and talk about how it relates to Nova Scotian history, and that's basically the topic of my paper. But I'll try not to mention the paper too much. I more so want to focus on the object itself, its relation in reference to everything else in Nova Scotian history, and the purpose it was painted. Okay? Alright, I'm starting my timer now. Okay. Of course, I already gave my introduction there, and I cheated a little on giving myself a minute or two to give the introduction. So, let's go into what the painting is. It's an oil on canvas. Right? It's about 1 meter by 70 centimeters, give or take. I haven't measured it, but I recall in my memory that it's about this size. I have asked Amber Laurie for more exact measurements for my eventual paper that I'll be submitting, but for now, this is my memory is what I have. In the bottom right photo, you can see that that is the way it looks today. The top left is what the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic has presented on their site. They don't have a picture of the original on their site, which I personally think is not quite right. I think they really should have both the original in its current form, and then their interpretation, and label it as interpretation. That's, of course, just my opinion of them. Anyways, the frame it is in is I believe the frame to be original or to have been very close to the period it was painted. And that's mostly because the frame has a lot of scratches and little dents and things. It's clearly been moved around over the years. But on the back, when you look from the side, it has raw timber exposed. It hasn't been sanded. So it has that sort of flecking of wood coming out almost. That sort of thing that you see. I have a 100-year-old dinner table in my dining room that has a similar thing on the timbers underneath. So it seems to be at least, the frame itself seems to be quite old. I don't want to act like I'm a professional on dating these things, but it should be from at least the early 20th century, ballpark. But anyways, it has ornate gold scrolling on it. It was, let's see, I didn't even read my notes. That's okay. Alright, well, I guess that finishes what I had for this slide. Alright, so I'm going to try to keep this part brief because I did not really include much of this in my paper. There will probably be brief mention of this. This is Harvie's Wharf, as it was in 1983, I believe. I don't think it ended up getting restored. There might be a new wharf in its place now, but the timbers and everything were so rough, as can be seen by the photo, that I believe they ended up destroying it for safety reasons, and then would have either reconstructed it or used bits and pieces to make a new wharf, or perhaps they didn't build a new wharf at all. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a lot of information on the status of the current wharf. I only found this protest about not destroying the wharf in 1983 that didn't seem to have a conclusion to it, so I guess I'll have to go to Avondale sometime and check. So this is where the barque John A. Harvie was launched from in 1778, I believe. And if I can have the right mouse in my hand, I can double check that date. Yes. So it was launched in 1776. And whoopsies. Well, this brings me to this then. After it was launched, it survived about 4 years before sinking, which was a bit tragic. Harvie doesn't build many more ships after this one, if any. This was sort of his crowning achievement, and it ended up at the bottom of the ocean off the coast of Ireland, so not the greatest end to his shipbuilding story. It was the 14th ship he built, and it was sort of his baby. So it's a little unfortunate. You can see his family flag flies atop it in Fred Wettering's painting here. The flag signals I discovered based on the source written by Harvie's descendant don't seem to mean anything. It might have been some sort of, he suspects, Ralph A. Harvie, he suspects it was some sort of pun in German that nobody understood except the painter, which there is a lot of irony to unpack there, which I'll let you unpack on your own. The flag of the time, which this was, I believe, the Canadian flag at the time, it can be seen. Unfortunately, I didn't think to grab any larger pictures of this flag before I started presenting this, so I might have to look into that for my paper. Alright, I'll discuss that ship in the background in a moment. Okay, what's going on with the mouse here? Okay, I'm going to turn this mouse off, and I'm going to flick back up. There we go. So, what was seen in the painting? Why so much detail, right? Every single crewmate and the captain were visible, including the cooks. Cooks had no reason to be up on deck, but they were. And it's especially interesting, and I mentioned this in my paper too, because they decided to include, I believe the cook and I believe it may have been the cook's wife, or one of, or possibly a deckhand. There were 2 black individuals on the ship that could be seen, which it wasn't terribly common for people to give credit to black individuals at this time, though not unheard of. And the painting showed the name of the ship, of course. It also focused on very little details. I apologize for the poor quality of this image. I'm trying to keep an eye on my time. The rails in the real painting can be seen in fine detail. There's gold scrolling that goes along close to the back of the ship. They did only have one perspective for the ship. There may have been others made, but if there were, they aren't present in the gallery. So my suspicions are this painting may have never been pulled out of the frame. They probably inspected it when they got to the MMA. There may have been sketches at some point pointing out those issues of other perspectives if there was anything else of value, which I'll get to why that would be. Trying to explore some other Nova Scotian ships, I looked into some other ships that were being presented by the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic, and I came across this one that was being presented in 1908, which was fascinating to me, because this was a schooner that was called the Irma Bentley, which was being launched after the golden age of sail for Nova Scotia. But regardless of that, it is a part of the ship history of Nova Scotia. And I think that's why this painting is so significant. Not just because of all of the ship history, like this much less grand ship in comparison to that of the John A. Harvie, but also because with the John A. Harvie, it really expresses the golden age of sail for Nova Scotia, which was from 1860 to 1890. It's before the Iron Age of sail, if you will. It's not really sail, it's just steam age, if you might. 90% of ships prior to the invention of the Scotch broiler, 90% of ships prior to the Scotch broiler were made of wood and would have copper bottoming installed so they could go through the different parts of Bermuda without having this type of sea worm eat into the wood, cause leaks. And after, everything just dies off. This brings me back to that little ship in the background, right? It's an early steamship, and you can tell it's early because it still has sails on it. They don't quite trust the Scotch broiler to the full extent yet, even though the latest this could be painted is in 1780, 1781, because the ship sinks in late 1780, right? So this would have to have been some of the earlier ships that were being produced, sort of testing around, dipping their toes in the water. They weren't quite fully trustworthy of this style of ship. Yes. So this, getting past the golden age of sail, and past all that historical content, this brings me to how the John A. Harvie was sort of like a flagship for Avondale. I have to do more research on this as well, so don't quote me too closely on this. But it was at the very least a big flagship for Harvie and Harvie's Wharf. It was the biggest produced in Avondale. We have that on there. There's lots of records of that in Lloyd's logs, otherwise, and the Avondale ship logs. It had well over 1,000 tons of capacity, which is very big for a ship. This ship was estimated in their time to cost, without all the extra details, about $65,000. And in modern times, I calculated it with one of these dollar inflation not apps, it's a site. In modern times, it's a $5.5 million ship. This is not a small project, and this is not a cheap little schooner. This is a major achievement. There are, I believe, 6 or 7 investors who go in on this ship together, and Harvie is the biggest of them, and he builds the ship with Mosier, his business partner. So when it sinks, of course, he's heartbroken, and this was, like I said, this is his crowning achievement. But this made me question, what other major flagships were there in the golden age of Nova Scotian and Canadian sail during the time where we were fourth in the world for shipping? And one of the big ones that's also presented by the MMA, actually, if I recall. Oh wait, no, this is a photo from Wikipedia, I believe. Is the William D. Lawrence, which came out of Maitland. And that's one of the longest wooden ships built in Canada. And that's built close to the same period as the John A. Harvie. That's built in 1873, which in my paper I'll be doing a bit more discussion. I'll be doing another chapter that I haven't written out as much yet on flagships, on the significance of flagships, and how the records of them were important. Anyways, getting back on task, this raises the question. Why was the painting so detailed, right? Why add the name on the hull? I know you can't see it. It is there. In the real painting, it is there. Why have the flags? Why have the varnish? Why have all the crew, right? And it's because, well, it was painted for insurance purposes. This painting was done with the purpose in mind of being as photographic as possible. This is what Ralph A. Harvie suspects, and this is what pretty much every source on the ship and the painting itself seem to imply. This was done for the purpose of insurance. It was such a valuable ship that they needed to have, and probably the investors wanted this as well. They needed to have insurance and make sure that they would not get screwed, right? Is this the slide? It is. So, it helped also to know how many crew were there, so that at a later date, if this ship sunk, as it did, you'd be able to tell if you got everyone off the ship or not. You'd know which families to compensate, and I think that's also a part of it, is the safety of people. The artist, a German sailor by trade, used a random ship code on the flags, possibly as a pun, as I mentioned earlier. But yes, so this is all I discovered about the flagship John A. Harvie, about the Barque John A. Harvie, I should say, Blue Nose Barque. It is not the only of its kind during its period. The Blue Nose Barques were a signature ship being produced by Nova Scotia. It's largely where the name the Blue Nose comes later, from these barques, and they're called Blue Noses, I believe, because they have a bluish hue on the front, I believe, from the type of tar that was used. I will just pause my timer here. There we go. Because my timer came to its end. So yes, this is the object I looked into. It may not have been as significant to my family or as close to my heart as I would have liked. However, it was still exceedingly fascinating to look into. I was very interested in one source that I found that read the men on the ship were shocked that it was a Nova Scotian ship, and then they realized it was a Nova Scotian ship being captained and mastered by a black individual, which I fully intend to look into that further for my paper. So, I hope you get a chance to go to the Maritime Museum and look at this painting. Of course, you know, Lisa, that you can talk to Amber Laurie, anytime to see it. I highly recommend it. It's very interesting. I will be looking into that ship on the right in the painting as well. So I know the sail is because I believe it's a Germanic ship, and their sail ships have brown flags. Anyways, I am probably exceeding time here by a few minutes, but discussion. All right. Well, I hope, as my my mouth's off because of that technical difficulty earlier. I hope that was good enough for my conference presentation, and I look forward to hearing back from you and writing this paper in its totality. Have a good night and stay safe in these troubling times.